All right. We're going to look at number 10 and your handout, bottom of the back of this first page and on to the front of the second page. What we're looking at, let me get my little inky ink here. Okay. When we talk about osmosis, remember we are talking about the movement of water from an area of high concentration where there's lots of water to an area of lower concentration where there is not as much water. There are three concentrations of water that we will talk about when we talk about little problems like this. First of all, water with absolutely no salt in it whatsoever. So this would be called, we'll call it distilled, meaning it is the purest type of water. It is 100% water and nothing else. Then there's water that's lots of salt in it, like you go to the beach and you see the ocean and that kind of salty water, okay? So we will call that salt water, okay? For our purposes in here. Then there is some water that has a moderate amount of salt, the same content of salt as a cell, okay, which is somewhere in between these two. We're going to call this saline solution, and it is what is in your cells. So let's consider placing an animal cell in a beaker of salt water. So here's our beaker of water. Here is our animal cell. And how can we tell it's an animal cell? Well, it has no cell wall. For one thing, it's kind of a round, blobby cell. And this is highly salty water. Now, what's inside the cell is moderately salty water, or saline. Now, the question you ask is first of all, what's going to happen to the cell? To answer that, you have to say, well, what is the concentration of water, not salt? You're always asking, what is the concentration of water first in the cup? Is it a lot? Is it distilled? Is it not as much? Compared to what is in the cell, which is saline, this has not very much water in it, so it's a low concentration. In the cell is a higher concentration of water because there's not as much salt in it. The more salt you have, the less room for water molecules there is. So the more salt, the less water, the lower concentration of water. So in this case, remember, water naturally wants to move from an area of high concentration, in this case the cell, to an area of lower concentration outside the cell. So in this case, the cell would lose water. And what would happen to the cell? Well, it would shrivel up like a deflated balloon. Okay? That's one way. It would collapse. Okay? So that's one type of scenario. Suppose instead we take the same animal cell and put it in a cup or beaker of pure distilled water. So here is our animal cell, and we're going to put it in distilled water. And remember, the cell, the water in the cell is still a saline concentration, which means there's some salt in it. Now, where is the concentration of pure water the highest? In the cup or in the cell? The pure water content is higher in the cup with the distilled water. Okay? So high versus a lower concentration in the cell. Water moves from high to low, water would move into the cell, and the cell would fill up like a water balloon. In fact, it would probably explode. Okay? We call this lysis. Remember, we talked about this word the other day. Lysis means to break apart. The cell would break apart because there would be so much water rushing in that the cell membrane couldn't stand the pressure and it would pop. Now, what if we placed an animal cell in a cup that just had saline in it? Okay, so here's our animal cell, which also has saline in it. And what would happen to the cell? The answer is nothing. Why? Because the inside and outside of the cell are in equilibrium. Okay? Now, if we do the same thing with plant cells that we just did with animal cells, so here is a plant cell. How can I tell it's a plant cell? Well, it's got a cell wall, and it's more rectangularly shaped, which is kind of a stereotypical plant cell shape. We're going to put it in a beaker of salt water. Now, salt, remember this is saline. Now, where is the concentration of pure water higher? Well, in the plant cell this time, because it's super salty out here. So that means water wants to flow from an area of high to low concentration. So water will leave this cell and it will collapse, but it's a little bit different from the animal cell. Let me try to make this a little bit bigger. Here is my plant cell. Here is the cell membrane that is hugging up against the cell wall. Now, if water leaves, the cell wall is rigid and its shape will not change, but the cell membrane is not rigid and its shape will. If water leaves, this cell membrane will deflate like a pitiful little deflated balloon. Okay? I keep over squiggling. And so what you will get is you will see a cell wall, but inside the cell you will see this collapsed water balloon that is the cell membrane. The word for this collapsing of the cell membrane away from a plant cell wall is plasmolysis. Okay? And that is why it does not work well to put salt by the side of the road. When in the wintertime we put salt the roads so we can drive on them and melt the ice, but the salt gets all over the plants on the side of the road and it will kill them. You don't want to be a plant living on the side of the road in the wintertime. Okay. Moving on now. A plant cell is placed in a beaker of distilled water. Now this is something we need to keep aware of as well. Again, here's my plant cell. We're going to put it in the distilled water. Okay. And remember, this has got saline inside of it because it's just a normal cell. Now, the concentration of pure water is higher out here with the distilled water. Okay. It is lower inside the cell. So water is going to want to rush into the cell. But again, like with the animal cell, the cell will fill up, but this cell has something the animal cell does not. And what this plant cell has is this cell wall, which will prevent the cell from bursting. It will just get nice and full, and the plant usually is very happy like this. This plant is said to be turgid. It will become full of water like a full water balloon. Okay? I'm going to write this down here. Turgor pressure is the term for the pressure in a plant cell due to water. And if you have a lot of turgor pressure, it's full of water, the plant cell is turgid. If there's not very much pressure, it is said to be flaccid. For example, this cell here would be flaccid. Okay? Now, lastly, if you put a plant cell in saline, it's already got saline in it, just like the animal cell. The cell will be in equilibrium with its environment and nothing will change. Okay? And here's active transport. This is from the last one. I'll just see it here. So energy is required because we're moving things against their concentration gradient, so you have to have a pump to do that. Okay? All right, that's that. And we're done, and I will catch you in class. I hope you have a good evening, afternoon, whatever this is, and I will see you soon. Take it easy.